get the job, right? And you've maybe had a few offers. You chose the best one. What suggestions, what advice do you have for, again, going back to this, like in the framework of being authentic and bringing your best self to work? What advice do you have for people that are just starting in a new role the first 3 to 6 months?
Yep. Well, my first advice is don't expect other people to put together your onboarding plan for you. You're going to have a lot of variance of how people do that and how good they are at it. You have to own your own onboarding. Not to say, obviously, like welcome any resources and plans.
That's counterintuitive. I don't think most people believe, like most people don't think that, right? Most people are like, okay, I'm going to get to this company and then like, I'm sort of waiting to see the first 2 weeks are going to be slow because I'm just going to watch some videos and meet some people. So I don't think most people see it that way. So that's very counterintuitive.
And it's funny because I'm a learning and development person where like I work with the folks who develop onboarding for the company, right? And of course the company puts a lot of resources and support and like headcount towards like developing that support, right? But I also know the limitations of those programs. And a lot of times, if the company onboarding will likely be more tailored to helping you learn about the company, learn the company values, the company history, the products, the architecture, the hierarchy, like all of those teams, right? Hopefully that the managers have also been taught a little bit about how to onboard effectively, but I don't know that every organization necessarily does a very successful job at that. I think the companies like Facebook and like kind of the big companies will, right? Which hopefully is what a lot of this audience may be looking at. I think they have more built out resourcing for managers and teams, but you don't want to leave your success in other people's hands. So I think you have to also be willing to own your own onboarding. And that can look like a few things. Learning the role, that I think is you can definitely lean into what the manager will put together for you. They're invested in making sure you learn the role because they're going to need you to ramp up, right? So lean on those. I think that's fine. The area that I think a lot of people don't put a lot of focus on is relationship building. And so when you start, I think it's important if your manager hasn't already done this for you, hopefully they have, but to ask for a list of folks that they think you should meet with. On the team, yes, but also outside of the team. Who are going to be your main stakeholders? Develop that rapport with them early on, especially before you are working with them. Because once you start working with them, your relationship becomes all about that like project, right? And it gets a lot harder to get to know each other. So do it early on where there's still like no expectations of you, where you can just make it more about like, hey, I'm Neda, introducing yourself, letting them know you're there on this team as a resource or whatever it may be, right? And like getting to know them one-on-one a little more personally and developing that rapport so you can leverage that once you start working with them on a project. So developing trust, that's super important. Learning about your team, again, before you start working with them, because once you start working, tensions can rise if you have different styles of doing things, right? So take that opportunity to build that trust and get to know them. I like to even ask questions like, what stresses you out, so that I'm aware of like, what are things that like make that person stressed. That has helped me a lot in knowing like what to avoid, or like, okay, there's stress. It's not about me, like how to work with them, how do they like to receive feedback, like let them know you're open to feedback.
I feel like you have a list of these questions.
Get to know what they like to do for fun.
You have a list of these questions. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my gosh. They're in my head at this point. I've built them literally for my company.
That would be cool. Yeah.
I should. I'll add one. I'll make one. I've made them for my companies, so it's also like in my head. But yeah, I mean, those are the types of things. And then I always think another question to ask your manager, not just stakeholders, but also like who could be your allies, or just people that like could be great for you to network with, that they think you might get along with. That might become your friends. And then you do your own work in finding those. A lot of engagement questions often ask, do you have a best friend at work? And it's because research has shown that having a friend at work can really help with your engagement. And I think that's so true. Like, I have always had like my people that I like to go to, that I have lunch with, and just somebody that like I can be myself with, or if I'm having a tough time on my team, that I can go talk to them about it. Right. Like, so kind of having your like network and your support around you. And I think that's really up to you to build that. Your manager can help guide it or offer resources and suggestions, but you may have to ask for it because they might not. But that's going to be like super important to your success.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I think like it also goes back to the same thing in interviewing. Like you have to have sort of the courage to do that, right? To go out and start. I mean, because you don't know anyone, you're sort of the new person, so you have to have this sort of energy and courage to go out and start doing that and put in that effort. And
Yeah.
how does this change in a remote company or more remote, like just for most companies right now?
Yeah. I'll answer that. And then if you struggle with asking for like going out and making those connections, maybe ask your manager if they
Oh,
can
okay.
make the introduction.
Yeah.
That can also be
Yeah.
helpful, by the way, and you not feeling like
Makes
you have to
sense.
be the one to reach out. And your manager can explain like, hey, they're going to work with you in
Yeah.
this kind of context, right? And so that's you start talking about
Mm-hmm.
the role
Mm-hmm.
first, and then you kind of get to know each other. Okay, remote context. So that's onboarding in a remote
Yeah.
environment is so hard. You're not there. You're not getting to get to have the face to face. You don't really know the company culture that well because like, you're at home mostly, right? Um, and so I think that the leaning into maybe more casual one-on-ones, especially, can be really helpful for that. Starting with your own team. Maybe don't expand yet to like stakeholders and all of those people. Just start with your own team because you're going to get to work with them every day.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to have that rapport and kind of start there. Or maybe even if you have the courage and maybe the sixth courage as well, like asking your manager, like, hey, can we have like a next team meeting where like maybe you help me get to know the team a little bit, and like
Mm-hmm.
as a manager, that is something that you can do is facilitate like, hey, here's this person, and then go around and have each person kind of intro themselves a little bit, like what do they like to do for fun, and so hopefully you learn a couple of things that you can talk with that person about, right? I have had from any managers out there that are listening to this too, or if you're an employee, maybe you can ask for this. Even putting
Mm-hmm.
together like a slide about yourself as an intro in a team meeting, and you can
Yeah.
share a little bit about yourself, or maybe you put together something your manager sends out to the team if you're not okay with presenting, right? Just starting in small little ways, finding your comfort, asking for support with your manager to like be there as your ally. But just starting with the casual one-on-ones where it's less about the work and more about, hey, this is who I am. I just want to get to know you a little bit. And I promise you, it's always going to go well. I have never had one of those go badly. Like people are always super friendly. They want to get to know you. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of that confidence I think you'll be surprised how enjoyable that conversation will
Yeah.
be.
That makes a lot of sense. It's harder to emphasize that sometimes, even though we all crave, you know, strong relationships. It's harder to emphasize that sometimes when we're not around people or not in the office, right? And so you sometimes just want to be like heads down, like, okay, I'm going to get into my work. I got to get good at this job, figure out all the tools. But if you don't have those relationships at first that are strong, then it's just going to be a lot slower. You're going to get frustrated. You're not going to be able to push
Yeah.
back or figure out what you need to do in the long run. So yeah,
Yeah. Work through conflict. Right. And I think I'm pretty sociable, even though I'm an introvert. I don't love it. I'm not going to lie. Every time I would look at my calendar and I see that 30-minute block and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to put on the like
yeah,
sociable Neda. But I think what helped me was setting goals, even just saying, I'm going to do 2 a week. And then you get those 2 done,
mm-hmm.
like you'll feel good at the end, like you've built 2 more relationships you can lean on, but maybe if you're like adverse to that a little bit, like just set a goal around it and just kind of try to like do it in a way that feels manageable to you. It doesn't mean you have to have like
Yeah,
10 in a week, right? Just do like a goal that kind of works for you.
makes sense. Random question: are you more of a cat person or a dog person?
Oh, definite dog person.
Okay, okay, interesting. Yes, I read some research recently about dog and cat people and how introverts tend to be more cat people and extroverts tend to be more dog people.